Sunday night from Unlock the Middle. You know, Sunday nights are always a night we look to get a little better by reaching out to people across the country and talk about educational topics that are just germane to what we do. My name is Dean Packard. I'm the proud principal of Charlton Middle School in Charlton, Massachusetts. Alongside me tonight, I have Josh Tovar from the great state of Texas. You know, Josh, Sunday nights are always fun. There's no doubt we go seeking new talent each and every week. And tonight, we are not going to disappoint our audience at all. And we're very much looking forward to talking with Eric a little bit. But until then, how are you, my friends? Great to see you.
Doing great. I'm hyped up, ready. Been listening to Eric on his podcast last couple of days, before that morning workout. Got to get that PD going on in my brain, creating those dendrites, but more motivated. Normally I wear my school swag.
I know that. What's going on? You're downsizing.
Swag, a little bit on because today, hey, I got asked by Andrew, and let me enunciate correctly, Andrew Boshelti. And he asked me a couple of weeks ago about hosting chat today, a Twitter chat. Never done it before. So after today's show, look at this high modern.
Turn it the other way, though. I'm reading it backwards.
Oh, you're reading it backwards? Oh, yeah. Man.
Turn it. I think I could read that.
BSP chat, the four agreements. So check us out after the show today. But, it's awesome because this network that you created, you and Chris, has been such a great
vehicle. And Josh, you always leave yourself out, my friend. We'll do that.
There's so many educators out there, Dean Packard, that that you find those connections with those individuals, and through this web that's out there, no pun intended. Eric was one of the individuals that you just connect with because it's very crucial that we use all the tools that we have before us to ensure student success. Because, I'm going back 2 years to his podcast, and we'll get into that with him right now. But, it's success breeds success, and you see that the tools are out there. We just got to listen. Yeah. That's all we have to do. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's out there. And you have other people's broken noses, other people's sweat, blood, and tears, and all you have to do is connect with a little bluebird. The little bluebird will help you out. And I still don't understand why people are hesitant with that. But ultimately, it is a great tool, and I'm looking forward to not only hosting a chat at the top of the next hour, but most importantly, having Eric here on the show. Are you done with your honeydews?
Am I done with my honeydews? No, they're never done, unfortunately. I always take a few off the list each weekend. But it was rainy up here in New England, so it wasn't a good weekend to get outside. So we did a lot of little things that took a little bit of running around. Hey, you know what we forgot to say? Whether you're in Alaska, Florida, Montana, Washington, it doesn't matter. Please share and retweet this because it's a little bit free, as always, and we're going to get a little bit better together. So do not be afraid to share this out. Josh had to
Good save, brother. Good save.
You got it. You got it. Hey, let's bring in Eric, okay? Because nobody wants to hear us talk, for crying out loud. It's all good. Hey, Eric, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you. Erich Bolz, it's a pleasure to have you here. First and foremost, welcome to the platform.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Honored to be with you. And that was quite a buildup. I hope to hit half that mark.
I'm sure that you will. You got to know something about Josh. He's got, I don't want to say he's long-winded. He's energized and has a lot to say sometimes, but I'll tell you, he says it in such a nice way, which is really good. So again, Eric, welcome to the show. Why don't we just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your story, your origin, the different roles you've had in education, and kind of where you've migrated to today.
Gosh. Great story. Fortunate to be born into a family of two educators. So it's a multi-generational business. My wife's still currently a practicing teacher. Worked in public education for 25 years. Started as a teacher, principal, special ed director to regional service center, assistant superintendent in two what passed for relatively large districts in southeastern Washington, where I've lived pretty much my entire adult life. And then July 1st of 2020, had the good fortune of punching out and going to work for research, survey, measurement firm, almost all education adjacent, the Center for Educational Effectiveness in Bellevue, Washington. And that brings us here. That's the very short version, but that's what brings me here today. Again, honored to be on your show. Just really appreciate the reach out.
Well, the honor is all ours. So let's stop with that right there. It takes people like you to make a ripple out there for others to follow. So thank you very much. And again, let's dig into this conversation. Josh, kick it to you.
Well, let's go a little bit deep into Eric. Erich Bolz, talk to us. As a youth, how did you approach education? who were you as a young man going and navigating through the school system and the approaches that you took that would influence you later on in all the roles that you just described?
Gosh, that's a great question. I should mention too, because I think it really factors into uh, ultimately my beliefs about education. My two children are 22 and 20. In fact, my son's going to graduate from college next weekend. We're really excited about that. It's both an on time and on budget scenario. So, fortunate to be in a family where my mom stayed home. She didn't have her college diploma during my formative years. She ultimately picked it up and became a teacher when I was 19. My parents had me young. So we lived on one teacher's salary. Lots of folks can relate to what that looks like. So not a lot of fluff in our house, but what we had was love and a love of learning with two, growing up with two educators. And I really felt like I got to spend about 15 years in public education, always tagging along with my dad. He was a high school teacher, coach, and then ultimately administrator himself. So felt like I kind of lived a lifetime before I turned 18. I knew I didn't want to follow in my parents' footsteps. So after I graduated from college, I actually worked in food service, and then ultimately realized I was just called to do this. And so second career, 25 years, worked in public education. What I really have come to believe is no school system owns a kid's test scores. Watching my own children grow up, my wife's a phenomenal teacher, one of the best two I've ever seen work. I've probably been in 1,100 classrooms, and she volitionally stayed home during my kids' first 7 and 5 years, respectively. And being part of that experience caused me to think, I don't like the phrase level the playing field. The playing field's not level in the United States of America, but I think there's an awful lot that we can do that really help replicate the conditions, at least institutionally, that can ensure every child's success. Watching my own children succeed, knowing what those kind of key components and attributes were, really, I think became sort of the philosophical underpinning for what I believe, what I did, and what I continue to do really in an education adjacent business.
That is, I love hearing all that. And I love hearing the fact that I call it almost an inside the park home run in educational term, because you touched on all the bases, from stepping up teaching to administration to assistant superintendent, now moving on through. So thinking back on your journey through education, my question is pretty simple to you. Who inspires you, or who is your role model in education that kept you going, that kept you digging to get where you are today? Because obviously you're not done.
No, not even close to done. So thank you for that. And boy, I can't narrow it down to one, but I tell you, watching my mom and dad labor, for those of you who don't have an educator in your family, you truly can't know how hard they work until till you live under a roof with an educator. So watching them do what they did whole career, definitely great role models. My very first principal saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, said, you should go back to school, pick up your ed admin credential. You'd be really good at that. I would have never thought about that. I was real happy in the classroom. And those are just three off the top of my head. I think we could spend the rest of the time on the show with, really lining out and giving credit to so many folks who have mentored us, because if we're honest, we all stand on the shoulders of so many giants, so many people that have taken extra time to provide us a hand up. And I'm grateful every single time I reflect on all the people who, for whatever reason, saw a reason to invest in me. And I feel like I was able to arrive in a place where I can really pay all that back by paying it forward.
Love that.
And you know what, Eric? Now that we're going to get into the meat and potatoes, Principal Cafele always says on his podcast, I'm going to sing like Luther. I'm going to take my time on this. So we're going to be asking you some questions in regards to your experiences and how you can share those tools with everybody across the United States. So take your time with this and let us know from the experiences and we'll get into the report later on. How is education a shared community responsibility? Break it down for us.
Wow. With a question that open-ended, how can you not take some time? So I believe with my whole being that education is the foundation for our society. It underpins everything we do. Without teachers, what else do we have? you think even all the way through grad school. I mean, thankful for great teacher doctors and that meant folks in the medical profession. So I think education is the most important thing we do. It is the closest thing we have in society to an equalizing opportunity for folks who come from all walks of life. It's the foundation for our democracy, which has been thoroughly tested over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And in the children that we serve, I think public education in particular holds the greatest hope for a prosperous future for a country. So there is no more important work than the work we do.
That's a really, really good point. And, as I think about that, this work is a combination of a lot of things, a lot of factors, a lot of people, a lot of relationships that have to take place. And when I talk about the word relationships, from your lens, Erich, explain how adult relationships within a school are key to school improvement, maybe learning environment improvement, and overall learning community development.
Well, I came to believe late in my career, which is kind of what caused me to ultimately punch out early, working for a company now that our bread and butter really is measuring culture and relationships. And I saw right toward the end of my career. So I spent 21 years in educational administration. And the last couple of years, 18, 19 being the last quote normal year we had, I think until this year, we had 8 schools in our district of the 24 named as high progress schools by the state board. In Washington state, we have 9 regional service centers. So in our regional service center region in total, we had more schools in our district named as high progress schools than the rest of the region combined overall. We make up about, where I work last, make up about 20,000 of the 60,000 students served in the region. So when I started to really reflect on, well, why is that? I really believe it was the principals who were using data that measured culture, so perceptual data, in small snippets, and then using a really incredible school improvement framework called the Powerless to Powerful framework. The 2 folks that were responsible for that work, Doctors Chuck Selene and Suzanne Gertz, out of a little school with a basketball problem in Spokane, Washington, Gonzaga University. So it was really utilizing cultural data to underpin 45-day cycles of improvement, rapid PDSA cycles, that the schools that were doing that work over and over again, so getting in 4 improvement cycles, really reflecting on how did we do in the last 45 days, what do we do next? Those were the schools that were making the great progress. And the cornerstone was, as opposed to looking at sort of the old tried and true NCLB school improvement metrics, write a SMART goal in reading, write a SMART goal in math, look at data cross cohort, lagging 4 months and 16 months, hang your head in shame if you atrophied by 3%, even though we're talking cross cohort, as opposed to doing that, really looking at, and this relates to the first question as well, not just staff, students at the center, but also community. And how are those relationships? How are we measuring those relationships? What did we see that was the inside of those relationships that might have been points of pain? And then actively working to improve each of those facets. I believe that school improvement begins and ends with building a solid foundation for relational trust. And it's not just me, some hack out of the Pacific Northwest. I mean, that's been underpinned by Brick and Schneider, many other researchers across the country, unfortunately never really codified in NCLB or ESSA. So we've got folks saying, get those test scores up, really create environments where students feel comfortable and staff feel like they can take risk, and you're going to see magic happen.
I love that you just said that, because in any roundtable discussion I have, any school that allows teachers to have the freedom and flexibility to take risks and create real meaningful relationships, guess what? Those schools do take off and go, and they move in a really solid direction. And I love the idea of periodic checks through data circles. And you know what? Maybe 2 or 3 goals, or you start with 1 goal and get an entire school aligned. And then once you hit that, go to goal number 2, and then then go to goal 3. Never mind having multiple SMART goals about just one content-based testing area. It doesn't matter. Talk about connectivity with kids and really trying to make sure that kids are engaged and having discourse about the content that they're learning. Man, guess what happens? Boom, it blows up, and it's good stuff. But yeah, relationships matter. There's no doubt about that. It's relationships before learning, any level. I don't care if you're a kindergartner, and I don't care if you're a high school senior. It doesn't matter. The people that are selling the material have to be believed in by the people who are buying it. And that's really important. Josh?
Bro, that I like that one. I love that. I'm gonna steal that
Why
one.
don't you use it on your Twitter?
I
Okay,
am,
take
buddy.
it.
I am. I love it.
Give me credit for it.
Yeah, but I'm old. I just forgot it. But it's all right.
I'll send it to you. Okay, snail
Eric,
mail.
I cannot let you go by because I already started hearing your podcast. You got to break it down more when you're talking about the relationship aspect of it. You see, we all say this during podcasts. We say it during PDs with outside people coming in. But if I'm the classroom teacher or I'm the first year assistant principal that's just finding my way, or I'm the 25th year principal doing the same thing every year, you know what I'm talking about. And we say relationship, relationship, relationship. All right, all right. What does that mean, Eric? What does that mean to that first year assistant principal? What does that mean to that 25th year principal that's been doing the same year over and over? Can you give some examples about those relationships that created that synergy that created the A+ environment? Does that make sense? Like 2 or 3 examples that you've witnessed.
I absolutely can, and I think that's a great question too. And I think oftentimes we hear somebody give a great talk, or you have a consultant come in and they work with you for a little while and they say these things and then they go away, and we say, well, but what does that really mean? So what really drew me to the organization where I work now, my former district was a longtime client, been a 20-year client, and we measure both what we call readiness to benefit and I versus they gap. So we look at things like willingness to address conflict in the schoolhouse. And then we look at things like willingness to work at change. So in the data, what we see in the I versus they gap is because we ask basically 3 matched questions. And in that data, what we find is I say, oh, Erich Bolz, as the practitioner here at the school, I'm totally willing to work at change. What I believe about my colleagues, not so much. And just in that gap becomes that PDSA cycle that I was talking about. So what we believe is then we come alongside and we say, okay, staff, let's get together and say, why do you think your peers answered this way? Why do you think the gap is as big as it is between what you believe about yourself, your own efficacy as an educator, compared to, you've got some questions about your peers. Why do we think that is? Come up with one hypothesis, and then I'm a big believer in small, simple, doable actions. So the next question we ask once we have the hypothesis with the staff is, what's the one thing that by consensus, have some discussion, fight it out, but come to consensus. What's the one thing that you can start doing tomorrow that for the next 2.5 months would ultimately make the difference, so that you can see, hear, experience something totally different inside of the schoolhouse? So I really like the way you gave us the opportunity to break that down from, we say relationships are quantifiable. And with that data, if we go through a process and convert that to small actionable steps, we start to see immediate transformation, not the 5 to 7 to 10 year deep change stuff that we hear in some other maybe competing literature. But transformational change can begin to happen tomorrow if we take a look at a data set, confront that data, and take small, unified, doable actions.
And before I get into what I wanted to ask you, give me a one thing that you saw that they agreed to that they would do for 2 months. You described 2 months, 6 weeks, whatever it was. What's one thing that a campus united around? I don't know, fist bumping kids at the door. You know how they say there's a whatever. What have you seen as one nugget? Because remember, we keep on talking, and then I think Dean has taught me a lot in regards to PDs and speakers and everything. But when we leave here, we still got to go prep for tomorrow, and we're going to forget. We got to know the how-to. Just like we tell first-year teachers, all right, this is how you create a lesson plan, blah, 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 blah. They don't want to ask questions.
Nope.
The good thing about being old is you could say, hey, I got to ask a question. So what's one example, just one, that someone can take away for tomorrow?
So one example, something that comes up over and over and over again is, when I say I'm not confident in my peers, it's generally not some big awful thing. It has a lot to do with unfamiliarity, especially you think about the last 3 years, secondary schools versus elementary schools. So I'd like to say I have confidence in Josh and Dean, but I don't know them well enough. So I'm going to just mark it neutral or maybe slightly negative. So just breaking down that unfamiliarity. Getting in each other's classrooms, or identifying team building activities that resonate with the entire staff. Sorry, you said one, but there's 2. Those are 2 things that can come from the discussion that absolutely begin to change that culture. Once I know you, once we've dialogued a little bit, if our backgrounds are different or our politics are different, but we've broken bread together, that sets the tone for a totally different relationship opportunity and belief in one another moving forward.
Awesome, awesome. So now let me ask you, what does successful student performances look like? Academic successful performance look at a high functioning campus. So when you walk in, you know it's spot. What does it look for? What does it look like?
You guys are just asking a great set of questions. I really appreciate the questions. We have 77 items across a number of domains in our student survey. I think it comes down to one, and that one item is what do the students say in the survey data that what do the responses look like around the question, I enjoy coming to school? So if the majority of students enjoy coming to school, we need to ask them in a way that elevates their voice. I have a lot of thoughts on that, but we need to ask them in a way that elevates those voices so we know why that is and we can replicate more of that success. Conversely, we see a lot of campuses where kids right now, the majority of kids right now, are not enjoying coming to school. And we need to ask the same question, and we need to be willing to listen to the feedback that the students provide us, and we need to be willing to make those, again, small, simple, doable adjustments.
I'm gonna do one thing here. Elevated student voice. Talk to me about that. What does that mean? What does that look like? Give a few examples of what you think would be a really good platform to elevate a student voice within any school, whether it's middle, elementary, or high school. Talk about that for a second.
I think that's such a great question, because I think elevating student voice, like self-care and so many other things right now, have relationships. We kind of started on that track, have become buzzwords, and we don't know what that means. I think elevating student voices means we find safe adults, those Pied Piper adults that you can that students relate to. You get 5 or 6 students in a room. You pull one survey item or one question stem and say, "All right, guys and gals, talk to me. Tell me, what do you think about this? Why is the atmosphere the way it is here at this school? And then what should we be doing about it?" And the key is, it's not just elevating the voices. It's because we can all do that, and we can all find a safe spaces for students to tell us what's really on their mind. The separator is, do we act on what the students actually tell us? Do we take that feedback, just like the examples with the staff, and do we turn that into small, doable, actionable things? And then are we willing to measure it? The students said it would make a difference. We committed to doing things they said they needed for us to do inside of the schoolhouse. Are we measuring that in some way so that we know it is making the difference? And then back to something Dean said earlier, kind of around the multiple PDSA cycles, do one thing. When it works, ask the students the next question, do that next thing.
I love it. That consistency, build upon consistency and build upon their voice. What a concept. Boy, do we get in our own way sometimes and make things difficult. My gosh, human beings, what's the matter with you guys? Come on, step back and simplify the process. All right, Eric, here we go. What is the goal or vision of CEE, Center for Educational Effectiveness? What's that all about? If they follow you on Twitter, they're going to see that right on the top. Vice President, I believe, is that the title?
Yeah, that's the title.
Okay, what does that mean? And what is CEE and what is it all about?
Well, I think 3 or 4 years ago, we would have said we're in the measurement business. Our measurement tools are absolutely our bread and butter, whether we're talking about leadership 360s for leaders or staff, student, and family inventories. But what we're really in is we provide an incredible high level of service after the survey administration, unlike I think anybody I know of in the United States. And because we have just some of the most talented and diverse educators in the United States working with us, we're really in the school transformation business. We can come in, review your data, talk with you about what you see in the data that you think is going to make the biggest difference. I can tell you what I think, but I don't have your context. I don't walk those halls every day. And then we create a plan around PDSA cycles, and we really become your support as you begin to transfer your school in a data-driven way.
Love that. Great stuff.
So let's go into what you brought to the table at the very beginning of your podcast in regards to that state of Washington's report. That I think it was 2,200 schools, something like that. And then from there, you got those outlier campuses, I think 30-something plus schools. And then you broke it down, and it's a big report, correct? If I remember right.
Yeah, I can't believe how much of that you've internalized already. So I was fortunate. I came on board. The study was about 3/4 complete. I won't bore the listeners with the metrics, but on the quantitative side, we didn't just look at the usual suspects of reading and math. We looked at multiple indicators, 138 separate linear regressions to come up with this beautiful Moneyball spread. And then inside of that, we threw out all of the schools in the state of Washington that were affluent. We looked at schools that were at least the state average threshold for poverty, and we looked at schools with significant proportions of either Black, African American, Latino, Latina, or Alaska Native students. And we wanted to see who popped to the top. We looked at 5 years of unsuppressed data in partnership with our state agency. We found 46 schools of those 2,200 that really, we hear people say your zip code's your destiny. Well, these zip codes, by all rights, we wouldn't have expected those would have been high-performing schools, incredibly high-performing schools. And then we went in and we did our thing. We just asked them, okay, tell us what makes a great school. And we came up with 11 common conditions and 12 characteristics across these 38 schools. So less than 2% of the schools in the state of Washington, who are not just beating the odds one year, not just celebrating a great windfall of ELA test results, but for 5 years, high performance in attendance, high performance in dual credits, high performance in graduation, high performance in reading, high performance in math. And you couldn't backslide, and one factor couldn't mask the other. So we really learned a great deal. And I think as great as the metrics were, the conversations that we had with staff, student, and community when they told us this is why our school is unique. This is why we don't go to the neighboring districts as teachers, even though they might pay $5,000 or $10,000 a year more. It was really an incredible experience to learn from these schools. And I think it's only the second study of its kind done in the United States. So there's so much to be learned on our website if folks will just take a look at that study. It was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, so it's all public domain, greater good stuff. Doesn't cost you anything to download it, and there's just marvelous insights inside of that study. So thanks for letting us talk about that a little bit.
So based off of that, and then you see the caveman has a couple of questions. That I also do. It takes me time to go through data, so and I really need to sit down in a quiet place to analyze everything. So I'm out there, people like me, and we really like reading this and reviewing it at my own pace and my own understanding. Question number one is, this report that was supported by the Gates Foundation, was this before COVID or was this after COVID?
Great question. So we looked at the academic data from 14 to 19. I said we had 5 years of unsuppressed academic attendance, course completion, graduation rate data across the state. We looked at K-12. So that was pre-COVID. We crunched the numbers in 2020, and you all know what happened in 2020. So right as we finished the quantitative side of the study, which in my view, it's amazing, but it's not talking to people about what makes a difference in their school is really the most critical part. That became very difficult. So we had to completely redesign the study, flip everything over to Zoom. We actually had 46 schools that qualified. We ended up, 38 ended up working with us. And, like everybody else, we pivoted and had a lot of online community forums, following up with folks online, not able to do a lot of the work in person because it was all over the state of Washington. And we were able to get pretty amazing data and conversations out of folks, even though it wasn't the environment that we had hoped for.
And did you base this off of the Fed's math and ELAR and the growth? Was that the baseline for both?
We did look at 5 years of Smarter Balance data on our state level for the academic side of it, but we looked at it. Everything had equal weight. We looked at attendance, we looked at graduation rates, and we looked at cross credit, dual credit at the secondary level as well. So it's not your typical one trick pony math and ELA. Look at these schools popping out there.
Was there the young ladies, the principal in that little community that created an early college? Did that have more weight than your regular traditional schools? The early college credits, the dual credit, IB, AP, did that outweigh your traditional scores?
IB, AP, college and the high school. All of that really helped. So you had, and what was great about it, you had to be, for people who love math, I'm an English teacher, so I'm not one of those people, but for people who love math, you had to be a standard deviation above what was expected for your school demographically in math and in ELA. you had to be a standard deviation above attendance, above average attendance. You had to be a standard deviation above in graduation rate, and a standard deviation above in what your school offered in terms of some of those college and the high school opportunities. So each factor weighed equally. Again, we didn't want to, NerdWallet. There's a million outfits out there doing studies, crunching the numbers, saying, look at those great ELA scores at your school. We wanted a much more balanced look at what these schools in towns where you may not have expected it, because you brought up the Bridgeport, Washington story. No one would expect that they have that level of college and high school in a town that remote. So we really wanted to look at schools with game-changing practices, not just schools that might be teaching to the test.
And I'm sorry, just to close off with this. The only reason I asked you all those questions was, if there's someone right now in Iowa, in the middle of nowhere, that doesn't have those, they would be a good client for you to bring all your knowledge and all the content that you have. So because you bring such beautiful, great things to the table. I just wanted to make sure that we brought it out there to the right people that might want to need your services.
Yeah, and as far as services go, it doesn't cost anything to reach out to us and make a contact just to discuss what's in the study. We'll share it all day long. It's a long report, as you've seen. I have it here on one page, I believe that if folks contact us and we provide information that's legitimately helpful to them, the sales follow. That's not what's in my heart.
Good point. You still got me, and I love when you said this: quantifiable data over a period of time. And the schools that show consistent growth mechanism and at high levels, they have those best practices in place. That is fantastic. And yeah, guess what? That is where teachers are going to want to teach, because guess what? The system is working. What they've decided to put in, simplified process, all oars rowing in the same direction, has created a learning environment that is just second to none. And I absolutely love that. And I love hearing about that. So great stuff right there. I'm just going to go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Dean. One thing I should have mentioned about that too: a third of the schools in our study at one time had been in the lowest rung of either NCLB or ESSA mandated improvement. So catalyst for change, maybe it was hitting rock bottom. We're better than that. But it was really heartening to see that, schools that we identify and label unfairly as persistent failing schools, 1/3 of them were the shining stars that rose to the top. So it just showed us that, with that commitment, like you said, everybody rowing in the same direction. With that commitment, amazing things can happen, especially in schools where we think maybe they wouldn't.
Yeah, great stuff. Let's switch gears for a second, turn around on a dime right now. Let's talk about podcasting. You've got a knack for talking right now, and I love just how articulate and eloquent you've been able to just sell your product and sell your being. That's a really important skill set to have. So now let's talk about your podcast, how you got started with that, and what it's done for you personally and professionally. Josh and I could tell you stories about just speaking extemporaneously and bringing great people in and then adding substance. But talk about you and talk about why you started and how it's helped you become even better at what you do.
Well, first of all, anytime you bring a great guest on, they make you think, you review their body of work. Like, we think our podcast that we produce, our PD for somebody else, that the learning's all on my side when I'm a podcast host. We've just been incredibly fortunate to have amazing guests. Both our podcast and we also run a mastermind. We run 2 mastermind series, one for principals, one for superintendents inside of CE. Frankly, they're examples of throwing spaghetti at a wall to see what might stick. We had a dissemination requirement, kind of a greater good requirement inside of the Gates grant, and our CEO, Dr. John Steach, great guy to work for, said, "Hey, what do you think we should do?" I said, I don't know. Gates wasn't prescriptive. So I said, give me the weekend. I'll listen. I started to get enamored with some podcasts. I think the first one I heard where I was like, I'm never going to be that good, but wow, wouldn't it be great to kind of have that sort of environment, was listen to one of Anthony Muhammad's podcasts, and was like, I think we want to do that. And then came across the mastermind concept, have since connected with Danny Bauer, who's kind of the master of the mastermind in contemporary education. But it's a business practice that's been around for 100 years. Both have been incredibly successful. And again, like setting up the podcast, we facilitate these masterminds. And when you get 9 or 10 practitioners in a room dealing with a problem of practice, what I learned from facilitating that and the follow-up matter that we're beginning to build, this library repository, basically of practical strategies that peers are suggesting, have just been incredible. So I'd like to say it was a meticulously crafted business approach. It was, hey, we got to meet this grant requirement. What are 2 things we can try? And our funding ended in 2021, but we've been able to keep both alive and going, and just been a ton of fun.
All right, you personally, I can hear it in your voice. Talk about it. How much do you like it, and do you enjoy doing it? Is there something that gives you that zing about just getting along with your day? Talk about it.
Oh, I love it. It's being able to host a show is the highlight. I love doing the research. We drag in great guests. We've got a really great formula. We have an incredible producer, Jamie Howe of the Moon Productions. I'm sure he's not out there listening right now, but we have an amazing digital creative in Central Washington that we work with, who produces our podcast. He pretty much kicks myself and my other host, our co-host, also named Eric. He pretty much just kicks us in the butt nonstop. And then we've just had incredible guests come on. We only drop monthly at this point, so not as many guests as we would like, but we have incredible guests come on. And I think the formula is super simple in podcasting. Get a great producer, find really captivating guests, and get 2 mediocre hosts, and you're golden.
Yeah, Josh Tovar and Chris Starcheski, bring along Dean Packard. And guess what? We've got ourselves a Sunday night roundtable. Good stuff, man. Eric, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Hey, just real quick. We work in conjunction with Sean Hurt, with Shika Houston, and with Principal Cafele. We're part of the Fantastic Four, and Shika's on board right there. She's asking you a question. How can they get the report? She's from South Carolina.
Well, hey, Shika. Seeing that in the chat. Our website can be a little hard to navigate, but if you go to effectiveness.org, click on the research tab, scroll about halfway down, you'll have the main report, and then there are 4 or 5 abbreviated versions. The one I would look at that I think will really pique your interest is just grab the practitioner view. It's only 4 pages. It'll cause you to want to read the rest of it. The big report, like any study, is probably a pretty good cure for insomnia. But what's inside of that in terms of the 11 common conditions and the 12 characteristics, absolutely worth taking away.
And is there any way you could send it to us and we could put it out there for you on a link?
Yeah, if you type it right into the message right now.
Let me do it.
Yeah, and you know what? Then anybody can have it.
And next thing I need to ask you, any closing thoughts, Eric? Anything that you got there that you like to tell everybody out there? Because after that, I got another question for you.
Yeah, type the question first, Eric.
I am dumping the link into the chat right now.
Awesome.
Pasting that in there, and we should be good to go. Last thoughts. I actually called the Center for Educational Effectiveness just to let them know that about 19 years in, I think I had figured some things out in terms of what made a difference in school improvement. And it was really using small snippets of the survey data and the 45-day PDSA cycles from Chuck Celine and Suzanne Gertz out of Gonzaga University. Their book, Powerless to Powerful, is an absolutely must read. It's I think the best read there is on school improvement. So highly recommend that as well. They're out there on Amazon. Just type in Powerless to Powerful. Lead author is Selena. When I called and shared, hey, I think I've really hit on this formula based on observing eight gifted principals make this work happen in their building. They asked if I wanted a job. So and the rest is history.
And so my next question is, has your co-host stopped renting movies at Blockbuster? Did he stop buying pants at Montgomery Ward? Has he put down the beta tape? Is he on Twitter yet?
I'm so glad we're out here doing this. I am going to. I'll find him on Facebook, and because he sometimes is out there, not very often. Going to make sure he gets a link to your show, and I'm going to say, get to about the 39-minute mark. There's just before the 39-minute mark, there's a really good question you need to answer. So I appreciate that. It's going to take a village to get EP active on social media, but we keep chipping away at it one mind at a time.
He could let go of MySpace, all right?
Boom. Okay. Still buying the 8-tracks.
Awesome. Hey, Eric, thank you for being here tonight. Anything else? Any closing thoughts, my man?
Just honored that you'd have me on the show. Hope that this, we have the opportunity to just, deepen our association over time. Hoping that as our show grows in popularity, we'll be able to have bi-weekly shows and get Dean and Josh on. In fact, let us know if you'd like to come on as a duo. I think it'd be fun for EP and EB to interview Dean and Josh. And just, I can't even imagine the mayhem that we might be able to make in that context.
I can't keep up with that guy right there. That guy's got a control. I can't keep up with him.
Josh is my younger brother. I'm gonna have to give him some Wheaties or something.
Hey, and Shika, yes, his co-host is part of Tammy, exactly, because Tammy's her co-host on Create and Educate, and her Twitter handle has like 7,000 characters because she just picked anything. So we kind of push her, we kind of nudge her along the way. But hey, Eric, thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate you for being here, dropping that knowledge, being great. Hey, but it's not over, Dean. It's not over. Thursday. What do we got on Thursday, Dean?
Thursday. What is that? That's not office hours. That's Inside the Red Zone.
The Red Zone, exactly. And this will be the leadership. We got a superintendent in there. We got a couple of principals in there dropping the knowledge on how to finish strong in the fourth quarter. So thank you very much for being here, Eric. Join us on the Red Zone and join me in 15 minutes via ESP chat, the 4 agreements. Join us, be there or be square.
There you go. What do you think of that, Dean? Well, I think, Josh, good job. Hey, on behalf of Erich Bolz, Josh Tovar, and Dean Packard, have a great week, everybody. Most importantly, remember, kids deserve the best version of us possible. Have a great week, everyone. Eric, thanks again. Stay on for 1 second. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.